This past fall, I visited Southeast Asia, and I have to say that it was as rewarding as it was illuminating. While I didn't spend my time necessarily bar or club hopping, I did get the opportunity to sample various aspects of gay culture while I was there, and I thought it'd be helpful to make a short video talking about my personal experiences and observations as a gay solo traveler, in case you're thinking of traveling to Southeast Asia at some point in the near future yourself. So I started off in Singapore, and then I moved on to Kuala Lumpur. From there I went to Bangkok, then I went to Siem Reap, which is in Cambodia, and then I finished everything off in Ho Chi Minh City, which is formerly known as Saigon, which is in Vietnam. Of course, Southeast Asia isn't a monolith. There are major cultural differences between, let's say, Malaysia, that is a Muslim majority country, and Thailand or Singapore. With that said, I will say that as a gay solo traveler, I never felt unsafe or unwelcome in any of the cities or countries that I visited. And in fact, I would say that if you're a gay solo traveler, that you strongly consider Southeast Asia as a top destination of choice. And so with that, why don't we dive into the individual cities and take a closer look at the experiences that I had there on this amazing solo travel that I took. Singapore is very gay friendly. Now granted, within the legal realm, queer citizens don't have the full access to legal rights that their straight counterparts do. However, in day-to-day life, on the ground level, I actually found that walking through and touring around Singapore to be absolutely no different than life here in Canada or in any of the places that I visited in the Western world. One of the ways that was demonstrated to me, and the safety that a lot of queer people felt there, is that they showed their face very openly on social media apps, which isn't always the case, even in some, Western countries where citizens do have the full access of rights. There, it was very uncommon to find, headless torsos or pictures of landscapes, and that was a signal to me of how comfortable and proud people are to be, openly gay in somewhere like Singapore. In addition, Singapore has one of the national languages in Singapore is English, and so communicating with people in person and online was easy and very accessible. And because Singapore is also very diverse, racially, ethnically, religiously, and so on, it bared a lot of resemblances to the West and to Canada. And in fact, there are also a lot of expats who work in Singapore, and so starting this trip off in Singapore just felt familiar in a really good way, and I found that it allowed me to acclimatize myself to a new culture, in part because Singapore fuses together, Eastern culture and Western culture in this really interesting, dynamic, and great space for queer people. In terms of gay spaces, most gay bars and clubs are clustered in two separate parts in and around the Chinatown neighborhood. And I myself only ended up really visiting the cluster of bars directly within Chinatown, in part because, true to form, after walking around day and night, I was just too tired to go out and hit up the clubs or to go wandering too far away from, the metro station. And so, Singapore is like this far away from the equator. It is hot, it is humid, and so despite its relatively small size, there is so much to see that, by the end of the day, I'm surprised, honestly, with the jet lag and all, that I actually managed to get out and actually see somewhere, but I forced myself to do it. And the place that I ended up deciding to visit was Dorothty's bar, which is pretty well known. If you look up, gay spaces, Singapore, it's one of the top bars that's mentioned, and for good reason. The bar is located right inside of Chinatown, and it's pretty visible from the ground floor. I really did like the ambiance of the space. It's kind of cozy, which usually lends itself to talking with other people and meeting new people. However, the challenge that I had with Dorothty's bar is that it is a sit-down bar, and so essentially you get assigned, a couch or a table inside or outside, and you order your drinks, and you kind of just sit there, right? It's not really a stand-up bar, and so it didn't really facilitate itself to meeting or starting, conversations with other people. In addition, and this is true of Singapore as a whole, alcohol is pretty expensive. And so I believe it was around $14 for a bottle of beer. And given that price point, and given that ultimately what I was doing was just kind of sitting at a table by myself, I elected not to stay there because I just didn't think it was worth spending $14 to sit by myself, in a corner to drink a beer and watch, other people. Granted, I could have got up and started introducing myself to people, but that's, again, the space didn't necessarily read as, get up from your table and go and start talking to other people. So I would definitely go to Dorothy's bar again if I was with a group of people, or at least one other person. But I just found, as a gay solo traveler, that it wasn't a space that I felt was conducive to meeting or sparking conversations with new people. But again, I would still recommend going there if you're interested in people watching and you're happy to, shell out, almost $15 for a beer. Especially if you get a table on the terrace and you can look at the people, underneath you. There is some pretty good people watching if you manage to land a table on the outside on the balcony. Like a lot of queer people, I had my reservations about visiting Malaysia, but a lot of that had to do with me reading a lot, probably too much, online before my trip, and I think I just got a little bit in my head. I will say that my entire time, there, I never felt unwelcome or unsafe. But that being said, I do think it's important that you read the room and act accordingly. It's important to remember that as a gay traveler or gay solo traveler, you are asking to enter as a guest into a Muslim majority country. And so I think it's important that you just keep that in the foreground, of your trip. Online, I did read about people recommending that you dress in a manner that is a bit more conservative, not wearing, let's say, V-neck t-shirts or, booty shorts. And so I decided to wear crew neck t-shirts and shorts that went, up to my knees. But I did see visitors of all genders dressing in all sorts of ways as well. So again, it is ultimately up to you to dress how it is that you want to dress. That being said, and this isn't just for Malaysia, but this is a best practice overall when I travel, I prefer to sort of blend in rather than stick out. And that's something that I would personally recommend to anyone that asks me about visiting Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur, right? Again, read the room and act accordingly. Keep in mind, the culture that you're visiting. And I always, aim to be respectful of the place that I'm looking to visit and not necessarily stand out or announce myself as different, but try to blend in with where it is that I'm asking, to visit as a tourist. It is important to know, however, that Malaysia does have some pretty serious anti-gay laws on the book. And so even though, despite the fact that on the ground floor, my experience was, again, I felt quite safe and I never felt unwelcome there. I deleted all of my gay social media apps, Grindr, before I got to the border, and I didn't re-download or log on to them while I was, in the country. I will say that based on what I saw online and on Google Maps, there are open queer establishments that you can visit. I personally elected not to visit them. If you do, again, just be very mindful of the legal framework that you are electing to at least temporarily immerse yourself in. And if that's, quite frankly, a risk that you're willing to take, just again, be aware that even though these spaces do exist and they do tend to largely operate unaffected by the law, that the legal framework isn't one that is particularly queer friendly, and that these establishments do at times get, raided by the police. But it is again important to acknowledge that there is a queer community, in particular in Kuala Lumpur, that is there and that actively fights for queer visibility and queer rights. And if that's something that you choose to partake in, however it is that you choose, I leave that entirely up to you. But for me, I just chose to kind of blend in and keep to myself, and that's what I would recommend to anybody that chooses to visit Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur do as well. Thailand, but in particular Bangkok, is world-renowned for its acceptance of queer people, especially trans-identified people. And honestly, you can see and feel that acceptance everywhere that you go. Bangkok has a pretty large, I guess you can call it gay neighborhood, located in between Siloam and Surawang streets, in and around the Patpong night market area. Unfortunately, I have to say that I didn't really enjoy. I was not a particular fan of the gay area in and around the Patpong area. And there are a couple of reasons for it. So, first of all, I understand that tourism is a really big part of Bangkok's economy. That being said, there were times where people were not only overtly aggressive, walking up to you, getting up in your face, but there were times when individuals actually came up and physically grabbed you and tried to pull you into their establishments. And I'm not even making this up or exaggerating, which made me feel very, very uncomfortable. And of course, I would have to pull my arm away and walk away. And it's also just totally just unacceptable. In addition, I did find that there was, again, because tourism is the bread and butter of this area in particular, the whole experience really gave off like a hustler vibe. I felt like everyone there was really just looking at me as prey, as someone that had dollar signs dancing around his head, and that I just did not feel very welcomed or very safe there. That I felt like even if I went into an establishment, that somehow things were going to get added to my bills, or the vibe was just very, very, very off. And as a gay, and again, in particular, as a solo traveler, I just didn't feel like getting caught up in any sort of possible shenanigans. One street in particular, Siloam Alley 4, it's a dead-end street that is lined with gay bars, and all of these gay bars have patios on the outside, and patios with like 2 to 3 rows to them as well. And I honestly just felt like I was walking through a gauntlet of judgment. There were so many gay men, and from what I could tell, gay men from like the West, or at least outside of Thailand and Southeast Asia, just kind of looking at me in ways that made me uncomfortable. Again, as a piece of meat, as prey, whether it was, I don't know, judgment. I'm not too sure how they were looking at me, but the way that they looked at me just made me feel uncomfortable. So I will say, go to the Patpong area, which is also Bangkok's red light district. I would say go there and walk pretty quickly, and I would hold on to your phone and your wallet as well. It is an experience to sort of see. That being said, it's hard for me to recommend that you go into any of these establishments. If you're there with more people, maybe. If you're a more adventurous gay solo traveler than I am, again, maybe. But I have to say that out of all the places that I've been to, not only in Southeast Asia, but the world, this was the first time as a gay solo traveler where I did not feel welcome or safe in an area that is supposed to be, home away from home, which is what gay spaces and gay bars are kind of supposed to be, which is, I think, a bit of a shame. Unlike my experiences of gay spaces in Bangkok, which honestly was a bit of a letdown just given the reputation that Bangkok has, I was pleasantly surprised by the experience that I had in Siem Reap. Who would have thought that this little resort town in the middle of Cambodia would turn out to be a bit of a hub for gay tourism? I sure didn't. I chose Siem Reap over Phnom Penh, Cambodia's capital, because of its proximity to the Angkor Wat temple complex and the other temple complexes that were made famous, at least to Westerners, by Angelina Jolie in the first Tomb Raider movie. It took no time at all for me to realize that I found myself in a gay-friendly space that actively courts gay tourists and actively promotes gay culture, at least to tourists. Based on what I've read online and the conversations that I had with queer people in Siem Reap, of course, those experiences are going to differ on, depending on various factors. But overall, Cambodia is not known for being, anti-gay or anti-queer. And in fact, even though there aren't, queer rights that are directly inscribed in law, the country does actively recognize, or at least tacitly recognize, sexual orientation and gender identity as something that is not subject and should not be subject to discrimination. So the legal framework, although somewhat vague, is still inclusive of queer people and queer identity and culture, which is really great. There aren't an exorbitant number of gay bars and spaces in Siem Reap, but there are two main bars, and those are the two that I visited, Rendezvous and God Bar, both of which are in very close proximity to one another and yet also very different from one another. I started my evening at Rendezvous, which is a small bar that comfortably seats around 15 people. And I started off the evening there because it is a small space and I wanted somewhere that I could, just talk to some people rather than going to God Bar, which is a lot larger and is more of a dance club. And so, funny enough, when I went to Rendezvous, I was actually the first person there. So I had around half hour, 45 minutes, I would say, with the two waitstaff there. And it was great because I got to talk to them about, their life experiences and what it was like to be gay in, Siem Reap and Cambodia and, Southeast Asia in general. And then people started to slowly trickle in, which was nice. It wasn't like a glut of people showing up at once. And so as people kind of trickled in, I was able to start expanding the conversation, including them, getting to hear about their experiences. There were some locals, but most, were tourists themselves. And it was really interesting sort of having this big kind of fragmented conversation with all of these different individuals. Had it not been my last night, and had I also not been, starting to come down with what I felt was the onset of a cold, I would have stayed at Rendezvous a lot longer, but because my energy was draining and because I was up really early that morning, I think 4 a.m. for the sunrise tour of the Angkor Wat temple, I decided to leave a bit early and to head over to God Bar to check out what that gay bar was like. And again, even though I showed up at 10:30, 10:45, which, I think is pretty late, or at least, the time to show up when the party gets started, not a God Bar. No, it was still pretty early, and I was one of maybe 3 or 4 people there. The music was blaring in a space that seems to comfortably seat, or at least it's more of like a club, so it's more of a standing room with like a stage, and I think there you could fit maybe 100 or so people in there. And the bar staff was getting ready. I saw the drag performers getting ready, so it looked like it was going to be a really bumping good time. Unfortunately, as I said, I was up super early in the morning, and I was starting to come down with the onset of a small cold. So I ended up having a beer, having a quick chit chat with a couple of people there, and then made my way back to my hotel to crash. But I would definitely recommend that you go to both. I really liked the vibe of Rendezvous, and it's kind of what I was looking for at Dorothy's bar. That's what I got there. And I would also recommend going to God Bar, and if I ever go back to Siem Reap, and hopefully I do, I would definitely nap in the afternoon to have a full evening, because like I said, it looked like it was going to be a really fun, really bumpin' night at God Bar. Ho Chi Minh City, formerly known as Saigon, has undergone tremendous transformation in the last few decades, including becoming a bit of a hub for gay culture and tourism as well. And it's funny because my final stop in my trip in Southeast Asia was Ho Chi Minh, and it became a bit of an amalgamation of my experience as a whole. So similar to Singapore, gay spaces in Ho Chi Minh City are clustered in and around two areas. One around Bui Vien Street and the other in the financial district in and around the Bitexco Tower. Bui Vien Street bears similar characteristics to Bangkok's Patpong area, but like times 5. It's basically a giant open club lined with giant open clubs. It's overwhelming, really, and it's also, where a lot of dance clubs and a lot of adult clubs are located, including gay bars and gay clubs as well. Bui Vien, like Patpong, wasn't particularly my scene. Too loud, too aggressive. The vibe felt very hustle you out of your money. And, similar to Patpong, I would go once for the experience, but again, similar to Patpong, I would walk the strip very quickly and I would hold on to my phone and to my wallet tightly as well. The bars in and around Bitexco Tower are a bit less overt. They are more subdued. The area is obviously a lot quieter than Bui Vien. And so, unfortunately, as a result, it was difficult to locate the bars. And when you did, they were a bit obscure. And again, the vibe that they gave off wasn't very inviting. It wasn't very friendly. It was very kind of like hidden. So, similar to, my experience in Bangkok, I didn't actually go into any of the gay spaces in Ho Chi Minh myself. But again, if you're a bit more adventurous, if you're a bit more confident as a gay solo traveler, if you have friends, so if you're not a gay solo traveler but a gay traveler, I would actually go back and I'd probably go to the gay bars in and around Bui Vien Street if I was with friends. But I would be sure to bring money with me, because I feel like if I were to go there, and if you were to go there, similar to going to gay bars in the Patpong area, I would be spending a lot more money than I anticipate spending, if you know what I mean. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, my summary of my experiences as a gay solo traveler traveling through Southeast Asia and experiencing different aspects of gay culture there will help you plan out and contemplate what you can do as a gay solo traveler while you're there as well. And of course, as with everything on YouTube, if you like what you've seen here, please like and subscribe. Until next time, safe travels.